Most people have heard of Linux, but before Linux there was UNIX. This channel explores the history of iconic technology. And today, we're going to talk about one of the most influential operating systems ever created. We'll look at what made it special, its impact on the computing world, and how its legacy lives on today. So let's get started. Alright, first off, what even is UNIX? Well, back in 1969 at AT&T's famous Bell Labs, a group of engineers set out to create a new type of operating system. They wanted something that was simple, stable, and could handle multiple users at once. At the time, computers were expensive and mostly used for research. But this team had a vision of a future where computers would be everywhere. And they needed an operating system that could adapt to all kinds of environments. So they started coding, and in December 1969, they had their first working prototype. Now, from the beginning, UNIX wasn't just an operating system. It was a whole philosophy of how to build software. They took an approach called the UNIX philosophy, which can be summed up with three simple ideas. First, do one thing well. Second, make it easy to combine multiple tools together. Third, treat everything as if it's a file, whether it's text or hardware or even running processes. These ideas might seem obvious now, but back then they were revolutionary. For example, think about your phone. When you tap the camera icon, you launch the camera app and it does one thing, and it does it really well. That's the idea of do one thing well. Then you can take a picture and immediately share it with your friends. That's the idea of combining tools. You can also store photos on your phone, and when you want to see them later, you go to the file manager and view them. That's the idea of treating everything as a file. These ideas became some of the core features of UNIX. For one, UNIX was extremely stable. Even today, there are servers running original versions of UNIX that haven't crashed in decades. That kind of reliability isn't heard of in the world of software. Next, it was designed to handle multiple users at once. Back in the day, time sharing meant giving each user a slice of the CPU so everyone could use the computer at the same time. And finally, it had built-in security features to protect users and their files. Also, unlike many other operating systems of the time, UNIX was portable. It could run on different types of machines, which made it perfect for the fast-changing world of computing. So in terms of technical features, it was very different from previous operating systems. It used a technique called segmentation to give each user their own protected space and memory. And instead of a single superuser, it allowed multiple users with different permissions. It also pioneered the use of regular expressions, which are a way of searching for patterns in text. It even introduced the concept of pipes, which is a way of connecting the output of one program to the input of another. But perhaps the most important technical feature was its file system. It didn't matter what kind of device you were using or where your file was stored. To UNIX, it was just a file. You could manipulate it the same way. This approach gave programmers the freedom to work with all kinds of devices without having to write separate programs for each one. So overall, UNIX was a huge leap forward for operating systems. Not just because of its features, but because of its philosophy. It showed that software could be more than just a collection of tools. It could be a platform for creativity. Alright, so now that we know what UNIX was, let's look at who used it and how. Back in the day, the team at Bell Labs built their own version of UNIX on top of the AT&T 3B20 mini computer. And in 1973, they released a paper that changed everything. The paper described a new version of UNIX that could run on any computer that had a compatible CPU. And as you might guess, the name UNIX came from a computer called Multics, which stood for multi-programming on a compatible time-sharing system. The creators of UNIX wanted a shorter name, so they just took the last four letters, UNIX. But there was already a company using that name. So they added the trademark symbol, and that's why you often see it written as UNIX. Anyway, the PW1 paper was a sensation. Software developers all over the world got their hands on it and started experimenting. Some of the most notable early users included the University of California, Berkeley, which created the legendary BSD variant of Unix, and the company Sun Microsystems, which developed one of the first commercial versions called Sunos. In the meantime, other companies jumped in too. IBM released X in 1986, HP released HPX in 1989, and Oracle released Solaris in 1992. Now these versions were designed for different use cases. For example, X was designed for large enterprise servers while HPUX was designed for high-performance workstations. Each one had its own unique features, but they all shared the same core philosophy of doing one thing well. Now throughout the 1980s and 90s, Unix became synonymous with powerful workstations and enterprise servers. It was the platform of choice for banks, telecom companies, and anyone else that needed a reliable, scalable solution. During this time it gained a reputation for being expensive but also extremely capable. As for the average person, they were still mostly using PCs running Microsoft Windows. But things were about to change, alright. So now let's talk about how Unix is used today. So you might be surprised to learn that even today, lots of mission-critical systems run some form of Unix. For example, many banks still use mainframe computers running vintage versions of X or Solaris to process transactions because they are incredibly stable and secure. Telecom providers also rely on Unix systems to manage their networks and route calls around the globe. But it's not just legacy systems that use Unix. Many big companies like Amazon, Google, and Facebook run custom builds of Unix on their servers. These versions are optimized for cloud computing and can handle massive amounts of traffic without crashing. Nowadays, you're much less likely to find Unix on personal computers. That title belongs to Linux, which we'll talk about in the next video. But don't underestimate the power of Unix. If you ever get a chance to use a Solaris box or an X server, you'll see that the old ideas of doing one thing well and treating everything as a file still hold true. As for the future of Unix, well, it's hard to say. The commercial variants like X, HPUX, and Solaris are still going strong, but they're mostly confined to enterprise data centers. The open-source variants like Freebs and OpenBSD are still very popular for embedded systems and network appliances, but they've largely been overshadowed by Linux. Nonetheless, the ideas behind Unix continue to influence the world of computing. The concept of doing one thing well is behind the rise of single-purpose tools like Docker and Kubernetes. And the idea of treating everything as a file is behind the rise of object-oriented programming. Unix may not be as visible as it once was, but its influence is still everywhere. Alright, that's it for our episode on the Unix operating system. As we just saw, it's one of the most important operating systems ever created. It gave us many of the core concepts we take for granted today, like pipes and regular expressions. It popularized the concept of multitasking, and it inspired the creation of Linux, which powers most of the internet today. And if you thought this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel for more videos on the history of iconic technology, and check out our other videos, which explore the history of everything from the World Wide Web to the Game Boy. And if you really want to dig deeper, consider supporting us directly. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.